with the CVA team?
Anonymous smears.
I'm just asking for true or false questions, true or false answers. An event in North Carolina, drunk in front of 3 young female staff members after you had instituted a no alcohol policy and then reversed it. True or false?
Anonymous smears.
December of 2014 at the CVA Christmas party at the Grand Hyatt at Washington, D.C., you were noticeably intoxicated and had to be carried up to your room. Is that true or false?
Anonymous smears.
Another time, a CVA staffer stated that you passed out in the back of a party bus. Is that true or false?
Anonymous smears.
In 2014, while in Louisiana on official business for CVA, did you take your staff, including young female staff members, to a strip club?
Absolutely not. Anonymous smears.
So, is it accurate that the organization reached a financial settlement with a female staffer who claimed to be at a strip club with you, and there was a colleague who attempted to sexually assault her? Was there a financial settlement?
Senator, I was not involved in that. I don't know the nature of how that played out.
But you understand there was a financial settlement for a young female staffer who accused another member of the organization, not you, of sexual assault in a strip club.
We have multiple statements on the record referring to that.
But you claim you were not there when that occurred.
Absolutely not.
Now, the behavior I cited, if true, do you think that this behavior of intoxication, going into these type of establishments, women on your staff being so uncomfortable that they have to file these sort of harassment claims, do you think this is appropriate behavior for a leader?
Senator, the overwhelming majority of anyone who's worked for me, including the on-the-record statements that have been submitted to this, with their name on it, on the record, men and women who worked with me every day, are the overwhelming preponderance of evidence that testify to my leadership and professionalism in leading Vets for Freedom and Concerned Veterans for America.
Okay.
My leadership has been completely impugned on these veterans organizations that did fantastic work.
Mr. Hegseth, I'm not even going to go into the accusations.
And we managed our financial books with integrity across the board. How many people, everybody who runs a campaign.
I have limited time. I'm not going to get into the accusations that come from Fox News. I know you have some of your Fox News colleagues here. There were multiple instances of accusations against you about drinking on the job.
All anonymous, all false, all refuted by my colleagues who I worked with for 10 years at 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. and everything.
The challenge here for me, Mr. Hegseth,
only seen me be professional
is when there is discussion about personal challenges and you admittedly had issues with heavy drinking. It's hard to kind of square this. To square the circle here, it's kind of a difficult thing to do. Let me ask you, if I have about 90 seconds left here, if you had to answer these questions about sexual assault against you and your drinking and your personal conduct, would it have been different if you were under oath?
Senator, all I'm pointing out is the false claims against me.
Okay, I take it you do not want to answer that question. I walked into this hearing this morning concerned that you haven't demonstrated adequate leadership in your civilian roles. And this is a dangerous world we're living in here. And America cannot afford a Secretary of Defense who is unprepared for that mission. I'm going to leave with concerns about your transparency. You say you've had personal issues in your past, yet when asked about those very issues, you blame an anonymous smear campaign, even when many of these claims are not anonymous. Which is it? Have you overcome personal issues, or are you the target of a smear campaign? It can't be both. It's clear to me that you're not being honest with us or the American people because you know the truth would disqualify you from getting the job. And just as concerning as each of these specific disqualifying accusations are, what concerns me just as much is the idea of having a Secretary of Defense who is not transparent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my 2 seconds.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. I would, at this point, ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record letters by Tina Kingston, Louisiana State Director of Concerned Veterans for America, and Holly Talley, Louisiana Local Director of Concerned Veterans for America, attesting to the appropriateness of Mr. Hegseth's conduct with regard to female staffers. Without objection, that is added to the record. And Senator Banks, you are now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Hegseth. You have conducted yourself very well today. In fact, so well that I believe it's incumbent upon this committee to confirm you ASAP, to get you on the job, to clean up the mess that we have at the Pentagon ongoing at this moment because of the leadership there over the last 4 years that's failed us. In President Biden's first year in office, the Department of Defense spent over 5 million man-hours on quote-unquote counter-extremism and diversity training, what you and I might call woke training or DEI. The administration has refused to provide us any more recent data than that first year, but we know that it's exponentially more man-hours wasted on DEI over the last 4 years. And I wonder, what do you make of that? What could those 5 million man-hours in that first year of Secretary Austin and President Biden's administration, what could those 5 million man-hours have been used for?
Senator, that's a lot of service members sitting in a lot of briefs, hearing about a lot of threats or political perspectives that might be that introduce critical race theory or DEI or climate change initiatives that they and their commands have to conform to. And every time one of those happens, it gets pushed down the chain of command. That also includes new layers of leadership that have been created under this administration committed to enforcing those types of DEI and CRT initiatives. So we hear 5 million man-hours, and that sounds like a lot. The more troubling aspect is how many training hours that takes away from a company commander or battalion commander or a wing commander who's out there trying to maintain their force, which is already constrained because of what the Biden administration has done to the defense budget and defense capabilities. So they're having to choose between the political prerogatives of the civilians who are demanding more DEI and CRT and gender quotas and the readiness of their forces. And I believe this Pentagon is prepared because of our commander-in-chief for a Secretary of Defense, should I be confirmed, that laser focuses on these issues, and they're ready to respond. They want to pack their rucksacks and go train because they understand we live in a dangerous world.
I think that's an important point, a key point, because months later, while the priority of the Biden-Austin-led Pentagon was on DEI and woke training, one of the biggest embarrassments in American history happened when we lost 13 of our heroes in the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. Secretary Austin testified before the House Armed Services Committee a couple of years ago, and responding to a question from me said he had, quote, no regrets about what happened in Afghanistan. I wonder, what do you make of that?
Senator, it's shameful. They still tout it as the most successful airlift in American history, when what the rest of us all saw was true laid before our eyes. Abandonment of our allies, death of American troops, detriment to our reputation, and then no answers and no accountability on the other side. And then what was unleashed because of what happened in Afghanistan? The October 7th attacks, an invasion into Ukraine. The world recognized weakness for what it was. And who bore the brunt for it? The troops on the front lines at Abbey Gate doing an impossible job, whose external security, a single person, the only person held accountable in those, his name is Stu Scheller. No one else involved has ever taken accountability for it. When that microcosm becomes the reality of the perception of the American military or America's commitment to victory and success and positive outcomes, the world responds to that. President Trump is going to restore real deterrence by bringing a real warrior culture back, rebuilding our military, and ending wars properly. And if we have to fight them, winning them decisively.
I served in Afghanistan. You served in Afghanistan. 75% of our nation's veterans disagree with how the withdrawal from Afghanistan was handled, the embarrassment of it, what that's done, I believe, has directly impacted our historic recruitment crisis in this country, without a doubt. And you've already talked about that, but how do we fix it? How do we bring pride back to wearing the uniform for the next generation, to inspire them to do what you and I did, to raise our right hand and take that oath and serve this great country?
I really do think it comes back to strong, clear leadership, patriotic, pro-American, that says we're not going to focus on all the other political prerogatives. That's why we all have political perspectives. I said this before, and I'll say it again. In uniform, none of that matters. You wear green, you wear blue, you bleed red. That's it. Who you vote for doesn't matter. But when the perception of that changes, then you don't want people deciding whether to serve based on a political party in power. That's a dangerous thing for continuity inside your military, and it's fragile right now. President Trump, and if I'm confirmed with my leadership, we're going to restore the continuity of an apolitical military that acts decisively and only based on merit. They sound basic, but they're fundamental.
You and I agree that wokeness is weakness. Mr. Hegseth, do you support racial quotas in recruitment or promotions in the United States military?
Senator, I do not support any form of racial quota.
Do you support affirmative action in our nation's military academies?
Senator, I only support hiring and promoting and admitting the best and brightest, whatever their background is.
I think that's very important. Mr. Hegseth, Lloyd Austin, the secretary, later went AWOL. He disappeared informed the president's chief of staff that he was going into the hospital. Would that ever occur on your watch?
No, Senator. I know in any one of my jobs, if I had decided to go AWOL for even a day or two in uniform or around that, that would have been a concern.
I believe accountability matters. No one to this day, and I applaud you and President Trump for bringing accountability back to our Pentagon. With that, I yield back.
Chair recognizes the distinguished ranking member for a unanimous consent request.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit an article discussing some of the issues of readiness and DEI. There has been a comment that 5.9 million man-hours have been used for DEI. General Milley clarified that that is an estimate out of more than 2 billion man-hours that the Department of Defense invested during the time period.
Where is this published, sir?
This is published by Megan Myers, and I will get the
okay. Then
military.com. I'm sorry.
without objection, it will be admitted to the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Senator Slotkin, welcome to the committee.
Thank
and
you.
are recognized.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for referencing the great Carl Levin as you introduced me. We miss him in Michigan. For those who I haven't met in my 1 week that I've been sworn into the Senate, I'm a CIA officer recruited after 9/11. I did 3 tours armed in Iraq alongside the military. And have worked for 4 different secretaries of defense, both Democrat and Republican, proudly, and watched them make decisions that literally determine the life and death of Americans in the dark of night. I'm also a Democrat representing a state that Trump won, right? We both won on the same ballot. So I understand that President Trump has the right to nominate his people. We are going to have policies that we disagree with. All of that, to me, comes very standard. What I think I'm most concerned with is that no president has the right to use the uniformed military in a way that violates the U.S. Constitution and further taints the military as that apolitical institution that we all want, right? And our founders designed the system so that, we had posse comitatus, that we weren't going to use active duty military inside the United States and make American citizens potentially scared of their own military. We went through our own experience with that with the British. As the Secretary of Defense, you will be the one man standing in the breach should President Trump give an illegal order, right? I'm not saying he will, but if he does, you are going to be the guy that he calls to implement this order. Do you agree that there are some orders that can be given by the Commander-in-Chief that would violate the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, thank you for your service. But I reject the premise that President Trump is going to be giving illegal orders.
No, I'm not saying he will, but do you believe there is such a thing as an illegal order that Joe Biden or any other president, Donald Trump chief, could ask you to do with the uniformed military that would be in violation of the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, anybody of any party
Right.
could give an order that is against the Constitution or against the law.
Right. Okay. So are you saying that you would stand in the breach and push back if you were given an illegal order?
I start by saying I reject the premise that President
I
Trump will
understand.
be giving
You've done your
any
genuflecting
illegal
to him,
orders
but
at all.
This isn't a hypothetical, okay? Your predecessor in a Trump administration, Secretary Esper, was asked and did use uniformed military. Helos flew low in Washington, D.C. as crowd control. He later apologized publicly for those actions. Was he right or wrong?
There on the ground.
And
I saw the
understand,
helo
and I
myself.
respect that.
I've been there.
But you're about
understand
to
the
be
level
the
of threat
Secretary of
that was
Defense.
involved in that moment. I
Was
also
he right
understand
to? So he was
legality and the
Sir,
Constitution.
was he
and
right
the
or
laws of what
wrong
you have.
to apologize?
I'm not going to put words in the mouth of Secretary Esper or
No,
anybody else. from
he
this
said them
podium.
himself. You don't have to. What are you scared of? Did he do the right thing by apologizing?
I'm not scared of anything, Senator.
Then say
I'm
yes or no.
interested
You
in
can say
upholding
no.
the laws and the Constitution
Okay.
in any
So
particular
Donald
scenario.
Trump asked for the active duty 82nd Airborne to be deployed during that same time. Secretary Esper has written that he convinced him against that decision. If Donald Trump asked you to use the 82nd Airborne in law enforcement roles in Washington, D.C., would you also convince him otherwise?
I'm not going to get ahead of conversations I would have with the president. However, there are laws and processes inside our Constitution that would be followed.
President Trump said in November that he is willing to consider using the active duty military against the, quote, enemy within. Have you been personally involved in discussions of using the U.S. military active duty inside the United States?
Senator, I'm glad we finally got to the topic of border security equaling national security because it's been abdicated and ignored for the last 4 years.
That wasn't my question. I'm just asking, have you been involved? You're about to be the Secretary of Defense, potentially. Have you been involved in discussions about using the active duty military inside the United States?
Senator, I am not yet the Secretary of Defense.
Right. I'm
if
just
confirmed, I would be party to any number of
But you
conversations.
haven't been in any of these
which I would not
conversations.
reveal what I have discussed with the President of the United States.
Just have you been in conversations? You're going to be in charge of 3 million people. The active duty that I know you've been in conversations about using the active duty in any way, whether it's setting up in detention camps, policing dangerous cities. Have you been involved in any of those conversations?
Certainly, I have been involved in conversations relating to doing things this administration has not, which is secure the southern border and not allow floods of illegals to enter our country through an invasion that threatens the American people. And there are ways in which the military is already playing a role in that, to include 5,000 from Indiana and Texas. We're at the border right now, allowing for border security.
Will you
so there is
ask
plenty
the
of
active
precedent
duty military
for
to
members
staff
enforcing
detention
our southern
centers?
border.
Our U.S. military is not trained in law like Iraq and Afghanistan because that's not the training a uniformed military comes with. Do you support the use of active duty military in supporting detention camps?
Senator, everything we will do would be lawful and under the Constitution, but I recognize that this administration has abdicated its responsibility. President Trump is going to restore order at the border, prevent our enemies from invading, and yes, he has said
Sir, I get your filibustering. I get it.
Part of what happened.
In the spirit of preserving the institution that I think we both care about, legitimately, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I've heard a couple of different things. One, you said you will not change the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is what governs justice system in the military. Yes or no? You said that earlier.
Those are laws, Senator, set by Congress.
Okay, so you will not go to change it. You will not attempt to change it. You also said that JAG officers are potentially people who put their own interests in their own medals and promotions ahead of the troops. Senator Lindsey Graham was a JAG officer for most of his life. Is that what you believe about those who implement our justice system in the U.S. military?
Speaking about particular JAG officers I've had to deal with in my military
experience. Are you going to get
not
involved?
About a member of the United States Senate.
Are you, as Secretary of Defense, going to get involved in the implementation of the U.S. Military Code of Justice?
Senator, ultimately, it will be a big part of my job to evaluate decisions vis-a-vis the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Yes. Have you seen is CQ Brown on your list in the Warrior boards to be removed from his position?
Senator, Every single senior officer will be reviewed based on meritocracy, standards, lethality, and commitment to lawful orders they will be given.
Thank you, Senator Slotkin. I now recognize Senator Shaheen for a unanimous consent request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a request from a former general who served 35 years, Dennis Leitch, who most recently was commander of the 94th Regional Readiness Command at Fort Devens, Mass., who has asked that his letter opposing Mr. Hegseth's nomination be entered into the record.
Is there objection? Without objection, it will be entered. Also, I present a host of letters and op-eds from former co-workers at Vets for Freedom and Concerned Vets for America, as well as Fox News Channel. I also have letters and op-eds from many veterans and Iraqis and Afghanis who were helped by Mr. Hegseth. I ask unanimous consent to introduce these letters and op-eds. Without objection, is so ordered. Senator Sheehy, you've been very patient.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Entering a support letter in for Mr. Hegseth, submitted by nearly 90 former soldiers who served with Pete in combat. I would like to submit a statement from 86 of them who support his nomination, although they come from different units and ranks. The signatories commend Mr. Hegseth for his selfless leadership, love of his soldiers, and commitment to our country.
2 items.
Sorry, 1 item. I ask unanimous consent to enter this into the record.
Without objection, it will be entered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete, I'm actually going to ask you questions because I want to hear your answer. How many genders are there? Tough one.
Senator, there are 2 genders.
I know that well. I'm a she-he, so I'm What is the diameter of the rifle round fired out of an M4A1 rifle? How many push-ups can you do?
I did 5 sets of 47 this morning.
What do you think are most important strategic bases in the Pacific?
In the Pacific?
2 rounds of 5.56 can you fit into the magazine of an M4 rifle?
Depends on the magazine, but standard issue is 30, Senator.
And what size round does the M9 Beretta standard issue sidearm for the military fire?
A 9mm, Senator.
What kind of batteries do you put in your night vision goggle?
Duracell?
So right there, you're representing qualifications that show you understand what the warfighter deals with every single day on the battlefield. You understand what happens on the front line, where our troops will be. And what happens, unfortunately, in this country is decisions made in rooms like this, bad decisions, end up in dead 17, 18, 19-year-old Americans. And those Americans rarely come from families that sit in rooms like this. They come from lower, middle-income families who sometimes the militaries are on the way out. And they join because maybe they want to go to college. Maybe they had no other choice. Maybe they love this country. But for whatever reason, they joined and they sat on the dotted line. And when people like us screw up, they don't come home. And that's the one thing that I care about. As you remember when I shut the door, when you came with your entourage, Senator Coleman, I've known for a long time, and you and I sat together and asked you one question. You remember what that question was?
Are you going to have the backs of the warfighters?
Exactly. What is going to be your #1 priority? And I don't care, frankly, what all these letters and articles say. I've been a part of a smear campaign too. I get it. I care that you're going to have one thing in mind when you sit in that chair in that 5-sided building. And you told me what that was. So with that, you have my support. I'm sorry you have to go through a process like this, but it is one of the most important jobs in the world. We got to make sure you're ready for it. I thank you for your answers. I got one final question that's very important to me. This is more of a technical question, but I think it's to fix the Army in this can't be a 5-year problem. To fix our Navy is a decades-long pursuit. How are you going to fix our national? You don't have all the power. We're not China. Unfortunately, you can't snap your fingers. But how are you going to lead an initiative within the DoD to reinvigorate our national shipbuilding industry so we are able to compete with China? Because freedom of navigation is critical to our economy and the global economy. It's going to be a very important task for you to complete.
It's a critical question, Senator, and that's why I'm grateful that President Trump has said definitively to me and publicly that shipbuilding will be one of his absolute top priorities of this administration. So a lot of it does go into pulling things up into the OSD's office, Secretary of Defense's office, to shine a spotlight on it, to make sure the bureaucracy doesn't strangle important initiatives that need to happen. We need to reinvigorate our defense industrial base in this country to include our shipbuilding capacity. Some of it is on the east, some of it's on the west, some of it's on the Great Lakes. The workforce problems that our shipyards are facing are significant, and there's been a big investment from this committee, I know, in a lot of those places because of the shortfalls, manpower issues, everything else. But we also see adversaries that have been able to innovate themselves in ways that their shipbuilding capacity is, I won't reveal it at this hearing, multitudes and multitudes beyond our capabilities. So it needs to be a rapid investment, a rapid fielding, and then we need to incentivize outside entities to fill the gap. We talk a lot about UAVs. UAVs are very important, but there's also a future of UUVs, unmanned underwater vehicles, that will be a part of amplifying the impact of our Navy, because this administration has allowed our number of ships to drop below 300. It sets a projection of 340 or 350, but doesn't create the capacity to actually address it. And so if we're going to defend our interests, our allies, and put America first, we're going to have to be able to project power. That it means shipbuilding. It means historic investments in our defense industrial base there. And then also driving innovation and cost savings in ways that only business leaders inside the Pentagon can do.
When I'd add, I don't think any board in the world would have hired Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg when they founded their companies either. So this country was founded by young people who had a great vision. Thank you for being willing to serve your country again. And thanks for coming here today. I yield back, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sheehy. You yield back the balance of your time. Mr. Ranking Member, can we agree that you and I will notify members of a specific time until which the record will remain open for submission of questions for the record?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
That will be a day or two. This concludes today's hearing. I want to thank the witnesses and their families, and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.